This is Dave with Taboo Customs. Today we're going to take a look at our newly purchased 80s CJ5, and we're going to talk about in this video what we looked at when we purchased a rundown CJ to rebuild and use for our business here as a plow Jeep, and we'll take a look at a couple of the interesting modifications that have been made to this CJ5. There's a couple of reasons why we purchased the CJ5 we have behind us. One of the big reasons is that when I first started getting into Jeeping 25 years ago, my first Jeep was a 77 CJ5. And I had that Jeep for about 6 or 7 years, through a couple of years in high school, through college, and after college I ended up selling that Jeep, which I'm still disappointed that I did, obviously. So with that, we've always wanted to purchase another CJ5 to restore and rebuild and make pretty similar to that Jeep because I like driving it so much. The other issue is that we live in the Midwest and we have a fairly large lot and a fairly large drive, and we have to deal with snow. So throughout the years, I've been plowing the drive with my skid steer, which works okay, but it's not the greatest. So we were looking for something to plow with. Now this Jeep actually happened to come with a Meyer snowplow, a 6-foot snowplow with all the accessories, and even better, all of the attachments to actually connect to a CJ5 frame, which will be a very good addition for us so that we can use this Jeep to plow with, at least in the short term. So this CJ has the 4.2 liter 258 engine that came in. A lot of the CJs from that area. And it's a really good engine, and we've owned several of these engines in different CJs that we've had. Now the story behind this Jeep that I got was that the owner bought it and then he drove it for about 6 hours and the carburetor started having issues on him, which isn't uncommon. The carburetors for these Jeeps did tend to have some issues that were pretty prevalent throughout the years of the 258. So he says he parked it and then it basically sat there for several years and he just never got back to it. So we were unable to start it when we got there. So what did we look at and make us decide that we wanted to purchase this? So obviously one thing we checked was we made sure, they had oil in it, make sure that it hadn't leaked out. Someone ran it out of oil, locked it up, because, hopefully the engine's good. Now for us, if the engine's not good, we can easily source another one, but if you're looking at this, it is one thing you'd want to check. The other thing we looked at was any evidence of very bad blow-by. These engines obviously usually had a lot of blow-by, and the valve covers would often leak a lot. We've actually had some where you could just watch it leaking out of the valve covers. No matter how many times you resealed it, it always seemed like the pressure in the crankcase would get so high, just blow that seal out and then leak out the valve cover, and you'd actually see it coming out of the crankcase vent. The other big thing that we've ran into over the years with these 258s is cracked blocks. Now actually the first CJ that I bought, I drove it home, I got it all going, it was overheating. I actually flushed out the radiator, some radiator flush, which is not a great thing to do anyway, but back then I didn't know any better. And when I did that, I actually flushed out all the JB weld in the side of the block apparently, or whatever was holding that block in, and pretty much had a waterfall down the side of the block down here underneath the intake and exhaust manifolds. Now it's hard to see, but when you do go look at these, you're going to want to look under here and see if you can see any evidence of cracking along the blocks or back by where the oil sending unit is. Those are both places where we've seen 258 blocks end up being cracked. So beyond that, the only other thing we could look at is kind of the overall condition. Looking at it, it's complete. It doesn't look like it's been too messed with or jacked up. It does have a fuel filter, which is always good to see. Honestly, we have bought some Jeeps where for some reason they didn't replace the fuel filter. They just put a piece of hose back in there, which is always a bad sign. So if the Jeep looks like it's been taken care of, it's typically a good sign. So everything looked pretty good. Now one thing we did notice obviously is there's a lot of extra wires and different things, and you'll see that in a lot of Jeeps. Now the good news is a lot of these wires look like they're extra, they were added in. It doesn't look like that they spliced into the wire harness anywhere, at least under the hood, probably under the dash, is a different story. So that's a good sign. And like I said, with it being pretty complete, it looks like it's in pretty good shape for at least us to try to get this engine going. So obviously the drivetrain is going to be a big portion of what you're going to want to look at if you're buying a Jeep in this condition. You want to see, is it complete? Are there signs that things are drastically wrong? Is there major leaks? Is it out of oil? We did notice that when we looked at this, I checked the brakes, and the brakes are out of oil. The reservoir is completely empty, so we know we have a brake issue somewhere. So that's not a huge deal. It's not unusual. Even if I have to replace the brake lines on the entire Jeep, it doesn't bother me that much, as much as something like a major engine problem might bother us. Now we went through and we obviously checked the front axle, looked at the U-joints and things in the front axle, just trying to look at general maintenance. Was it kept up before it got basically parked? And basically from the front axle, the transmission, it's a manual, went through the gears fine. The clutch felt pretty good. We actually had him push it with his tractor, and we pushed in the clutch to kind of check and see if the clutch did work or not. The transfer case, the drive shafts, everything actually mechanically, without starting it, looked very good. Now obviously another big area on the CJs you're going to want to look at is the frames. So with the CJs in I believe 76, they started going to the boxed frames. It might have been earlier than that. I haven't Googled to check, but anyway, I think back in the 70s they did go to the boxed frames, which has kicked off a whole scenario of rust issues in Jeep frames, starting with the CJs. So with the CJ from that late 70s, 80s era, you will need to look at the frame really in mainly a couple of areas. Now typically the front part of the frame through the middle part of the Jeep is usually pretty solid. I haven't seen any major issues there. Where you're going to really want to check is going to be the area around the front spring hanger where the frame starts to angle down. This area is one of the big areas, especially on the inside, where the frames will rust out. The other major area is going to be the same thing but at the rear. Now in this Jeep specifically, the front area was actually really good shape, but the rear area here is rusted through. It's rusted all the way through, and it is an area that as we get into this we are going to have to fix. But even at that, the material and everything is really still mostly there, so it won't be a huge issue for us to fix that. Now another thing you can look at is going to be the rear axle. Now the rear axle on this one is a AMC 20. Some Jeeps might have a Dana 44. Obviously the Dana 44 would be a little bit more sought after, but most of them are going to have the AMC 20. Now the AMC 20 is a good axle, however it has one major flaw, and that is the axle shafts. The axle shafts in the stock form on the AMC 20 were a two-piece shaft. They had a hub and a shaft, and the issue with that is that hub that's pushed onto the shaft just fits onto a cone, goes over a key, and then there's a nut on the outside right here. And that hub will oftentimes, if you go to bigger tires and with the amount of torque that the 258 will put out, you can take that hub and basically just spin that key on that shaft, and essentially just now the shaft is just going to spin inside the hub. So one benefit you can look at when you're looking at these old CJs, if they have the AMC 20 axle, is look and see if you have the hub, or excuse me, the rear axle on the outside of the wheel looks like this, which means it has the shaft through it because this is where the nut is at, or if it's flat, because if it's flat, that means that they've gone in and they've replaced those axle shafts with upgraded shafts. Now beyond the mechanical side of the Jeep, the engine, transmission, transfer case, axles, frame, everything that's kind of the core mechanics of the Jeep, the other big section in a restore is obviously going to be the body. And that is the issue with this Jeep here, and something that we are going to have to figure out how we're going to handle this. Now obviously if you know CJs, there's an elephant in the room that you may or may not have noticed now, and that's going to be the door opening. And this is a CJ5, however, at some point, someone has decided they wanted to try to fit what looks like to be an older pre-76 hardtop onto a post-76 CJ5. So with that, the hardtop really doesn't fit that well, and it has some doors that are oddly shaped. They have a different shape, and I'm not exactly sure what the doors came off of, if they came off maybe an older postal Jeep or what, but they are not a CJ5 style door. And so with that, one of the previous owners decided that they were going to modify this lower door opening. And they modified it, and they actually didn't do too bad of a job of making it look like it was stock. And in the pictures, it was hard to tell, you know, that this was something that was modified, but looking closer you can see there's a lot of grind marks and things, but they didn't do too bad of a job. However, we're obviously going to want to make this look more like a CJ5, so that's going to have to go back to the way it is. Now the decision for us though is going to be a tough one, because do we go in and do we modify that to look like a CJ5 again, along with fixing all the other issues with the tub, or do we try to find a different tub that's maybe doesn't have this issue, might have the same rust issues, and we just work on that tub? More than likely, that's probably what we're going to do. But this is something that we probably could do if we really wanted to, and we're not sure. We'll probably have to see what kind of CJ5 tub we have. Now, obviously, one of the things with the body you're going to want to look for is people that have tried to fix it. Now, this body has been gone over once, so we can tell because we've seen a couple places where there's a lot of Bondo and there's a lot of patches. There's even a patch up here in the front fender that was riveted on and then just completely bonded over to hide the rivets and to hide the patch. So that's one thing that as you go through and you need to evaluate an old CJ, you need to look at, and you're going to have to decide, okay, are you going to reuse the tub that you have there and try to get it up to speed, or are you going to end up trying to find something different? Now obviously for us, you know, our decision on this was mechanically, this Jeep is in pretty good shape. It's fairly complete. So the tub issue is something that, okay, we're gonna have to overcome with this Jeep. Now this Jeep does have on the tub the standard rust through in the floorboards. Both the driver's side floorboard and the passenger side floorboard both have this same rust through. Now there's a lot of patch panels out there that you can get that will fix these areas. So you know, that's not a huge issue. Like I said, the issue is actually combining that with this big glaring, you know, door frame issue that we're gonna have to decide, okay, can we get a new tub or not? Now, along with that, you can see that they've tried to put this top on here. Now they did one more thing to try to fit this top that was really odd, and that's actually on the inside, and it might be hard to see. But if you take a look and you look at the roll bar on the other side, you see how it kind of looks odd. Now the roll bar is supposed to come straight up from that, but because this top apparently was a little bit shorter, it appears that someone has taken a torch, heated up the roll bar, and then pulled it backwards to clear the top. So obviously we're not going to be able to allow that to stay that way. So for us, you know, and being that we build different things, we're probably just going to go ahead and build our own cage to put in this Jeep anyway. So the last area we'll kind of talk about here is going to be some of the interior. And the biggest thing on the interior, obviously everything you can pretty much find online to replace, but the good thing that we saw on this interior is one, that it's still complete. So you know, again, it goes back to, was someone taking care of it? Did someone decide that, hey, they're just going to drill a hole? But it looks like they tried to do things fairly well and fairly right. Now you can see that there is a switch down here, and we did obviously, you know, looking underneath the dash, you know, typically on all CJs you're going to see where people have cut in, so you're going to want to try to check out the wire harness underneath, check how much they've cut into the wire harness and everything, because you could end up replacing a harness which will cost you upwards of $500 to get a new painless harness or something like that. Now we did notice that they went in and we could see that they pulled off this switch for the starter here, and that's what this switch is here. And you know, one of the worrisome things is they didn't wire it really well, so that is a bit of a worry. But they did go in and put in a new starter switch so we can tell something's wrong with the starter. Now, one of the other good features that this Jeep does have is with the CJs, it does have the tilt wheel, which CJs will not always have. I believe it was an option on the CJs, and it's one of those things that for CJs and parts is an item that if it does have and you end up deciding that you're not going to do this project and part it out, that is an item that typically can sell pretty well. So you might ask, what would you pay for something in this condition? Well, we paid $1,200 total for this CJ5 plus the plow. Now, keep in mind though, the plow was in very good shape. It was complete, had all the bracketry. So we're more comfortable saying we paid $700 for a plow, $500 for this Jeep. Now, given its mechanical condition, thinking about it that way, you know, we're not too worried about the $500 for this Jeep. I know that we could get it back out of this if we decided just to resell it or to part it out. So we're not that concerned about that. We think this purchase was a decent purchase for us to start with. Now, as we go on and we go through this project and we do little jobs in this Jeep, we'll continue to take videos of this project and we'll put them up on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like this video, you'd like to continue to watch how this progresses, you know, please subscribe, please like the videos, and thanks for watching.